Imagine waking up tomorrow morning. No phone, no family, no freedom. The door is locked from the outside. The walls are cold. The cell is 6 feet by 6 feet. Barely enough room to lie down. Barely enough room to breathe. And you are told, this is your life now. Not for a week, not for a month, not for a year. 27 years. 27 years of your one and only life. Stolen, taken, buried behind iron and stone on an island in the middle of the ocean where no one can hear you and no one can see you, and the world is told quietly, softly to forget your name. Most people would break. Most people would shatter. Most people would walk out of those gates, if they ever walked out at all, as something less than what they were when they walked in. But this man, this one man, walked out of that prison and changed the entire world. His name was Nelson Mandela, and what happened inside those walls is the most important story you will ever hear about what a human being is truly capable of. Stay with me. The year is 1964. Nelson Mandela is 46 years old. He is sharp. He is brilliant. He is burning with a fire that apartheid South Africa cannot extinguish, no matter how hard it tries. He has already been arrested, already been banned, already watched his family be terrorized, his friends be imprisoned, his people be beaten in the streets, simply for the color of their skin. He stands in a courtroom in Pretoria. The charges are sabotage and conspiracy to overthrow the government. The sentence, they whisper, could be death. And Nelson Mandela stands up. He does not beg. He does not plead. He does not shrink. He looks the judge directly in the eye, and he speaks, slowly, deliberately, like a man who has already decided that the truth is worth more than his life. He says, I have dedicated my life to this struggle. I have fought against white domination, and I have fought against black domination. I have cherished the ideal of a democratic and free society. It is an ideal for which I hope to live for. But my lord, if needs be, it is an ideal for which I am prepared to die. The courtroom goes still. The judge looks down, and the sentence comes, not death, but life imprisonment. Life. They send him to Robben Island, a place so remote, so deliberately isolated, that the South African government believed it was the perfect place to bury a man alive. They were wrong. You need to understand what Robben Island actually was. Not a prison in the way you might imagine. Not a place with libraries and gardens and rehabilitation programs. This was a place designed to destroy a person. To reduce a human being, a thinking, feeling, brilliant human being, to nothing. Mandela's cell measured 6 feet by 6 feet. That is smaller than most of your bathrooms. He slept on a thin mat on the concrete floor. He was given a bucket for his toilet. He was allowed 30 minutes of exercise per day. His meals were meager, barely enough to sustain life, and deliberately designed to humiliate. He was forced to break rocks in a limestone quarry under the blazing African sun, day after day, year after year. The glare off the white limestone was so intense it permanently damaged his eyesight. He would carry that damage for the rest of his life. He was allowed one visitor every 6 months. For 30 minutes, behind thick glass, his letters were censored. His words were monitored. His books were controlled. When his mother died, he was not allowed to attend the funeral. When his son was killed in a car accident, he was not allowed to grieve with his family. Think about that. Think about what that does to a person. Think about the darkness and the specific, suffocating darkness and of loving someone and not being allowed to hold them, of watching the world move without you, of knowing that outside those walls, your children are growing up, your people are suffering, your cause is bleeding, and you can do nothing. Nothing. And the guards, some of them, wanted more than just his body behind bars. They wanted his spirit. They wanted his hope. They wanted the thing inside him that made him dangerous. That quiet, unbreakable belief that justice would come, and they wanted to kill it. They mocked him. They degraded him. They called him by his prison number, 46664, because they refused to speak his name, as if by erasing the word they could erase the man. And you have to ask yourself, you have to sit with this question because it matters. What would you do? What would you do after 5 years of that? What would you do after 10 years? What would you do at year 20, when half your life is gone and the end is nowhere in sight and the world outside seems to have moved on without you? Most of us have never faced anything close to this, and yet many of us are in our own prisons right now. Prisons of bitterness, prisons of resentment, prisons of what could have been and what was taken from us and what we lost and who hurt us and why. The world was not fair, and we are breaking. Quietly, slowly, every day a little more. Mandela's story is not just history. It is a mirror. It is being held up to your face right now and asking you, what are you made of? Here is what the South African government never understood. They thought the prison would consume Nelson Mandela. But Nelson Mandela consumed the prison. He made a decision, and we do not know exactly when it happened, whether it was year 1 or year 7 or year 15, but at some point, in that cold 6x6 cell, in the silence of the night, Nelson Mandela made a decision that would ultimately change the course of an entire nation. He decided that he would not become what was done to him. He decided that hatred was a prison within the prison, and that he had already lost enough. That if he gave them his hate, he gave them everything. He would walk out of those gates, if he ever walked out, as another casualty. Another man destroyed by the machinery of cruelty. He refused. He began to study. He studied law. He studied history. He studied the Afrikaans language and the language of his oppressors, deliberately, carefully, because he understood that if he ever sat across the negotiating table from these men, he wanted to speak to them in their language. He wanted them to know that he had taken the time to understand them, not because he agreed with them, but because he was playing a longer game than they could even comprehend. He built a garden in the prison yard. A garden. In the barren, rocky soil of Robben Island, Nelson Mandela planted vegetables. He tended them. He watched them grow. And later in his life he would say that this garden taught him something essential, that a leader must tend to his people the way a gardener tends to his plants, with patience, with care, with the understanding that growth cannot be rushed. You cannot force a seed. You cannot scream at it to bloom. You have to prepare the soil. You have to water it. You have to trust the process even when you cannot see the results. He also began to extend humanity to his guards. This is the part that is almost impossible to comprehend. The very men tasked with his degradation. The guards who had been trained to see him as less than human. Mandela began to learn their names, their families, their stories. He began to see them not as monsters, but as men trapped in their own prisons of ideology and fear. And slowly, some of them changed. One guard, Christo Brand, who came to Robben Island as a young man, full of the prejudice the system had given him, would later say that Mandela changed his life. That through years of quiet dignity, patient conversation, and relentless humanity, Mandela dismantled everything Brand had been taught to believe. Mandela was winning, not with fists, not with fury, with something far more powerful than either. And here is where the story becomes yours. Because Mandela did not endure 27 years of hell so that we could simply admire him from a distance. He endured it so that we could learn from him, so that we could take what he discovered in the darkness and carry it into our own lives. There are lessons in this man's story that most people will never hear, not because they are hidden, but because most people are too busy looking for shortcuts to sit with the depth of them. The first lesson is this: your greatest power is your response. You cannot always control what happens to you. You cannot always control the walls that go up around you, the people who betray you, the circumstances that arrive without your permission. Mandela did not choose apartheid. He did not choose imprisonment. He did not choose the quarry or the cold cell or the 30-minute visits or the degradation, but he chose every single day, with tremendous discipline and tremendous will, how he responded to all of it. Viktor Frankl, the psychiatrist who survived the Nazi concentration camps, said that between stimulus and response there is a space, and in that space is our power. In that space is our freedom. Mandela lived that truth for 27 years. And the question for you right now, in the life you are living, one is this: are you responding to your circumstances, or are you reacting to them? Because reaction is surrender. Response is power. The second lesson is this: forgiveness is not weakness. Forgiveness is the ultimate strength. When Nelson Mandela walked out of Victor Verster prison on February 11, 1990, after 27 years he raised his fist, and the world held its breath. Because everyone, including the South African government, expected rage, expected retribution, expected a man who had been ground under the heel of oppression to come out swinging, to demand blood for blood, to ignite a civil war that many believed was inevitable. He did not. He came out and he spoke of reconciliation. He came out and he spoke of a rainbow nation. He came out and he forgave. Not because what was done to him was acceptable, but because he understood something that most of us spend entire lifetimes refusing to accept. Holding on to hatred is like drinking poison and waiting for your enemy to die. The people who hurt you, they move on. They sleep, they eat, they live their lives. And you are the one lying awake at 3 a.m, replaying it, feeding it, keeping it alive because some part of you believes that your pain is proof of your worth. Let it go. Not for them, for you. Mandela let it go, and in doing so, he became larger than anything that had ever tried to contain him. The third lesson of the long game always wins. Mandela did not panic. He did not rush. He played the longest game imaginable. In a world that demands instant results, instant validation, instant success, Mandela operated on a completely different timeline. He planted seeds in year 1 that bore fruit in year 27. Think about what we give up on. The business after 3 months, the relationship after the first real difficulty, the dream after the first rejection, the goal after the first failure. We live in 30-second attention spans, and we are trying to build lives that deserve decades of commitment. Mandela's patience was not passive. It was fierce. It was a burning, disciplined, intentional patience. He was not waiting because he had no choice. He was waiting because he trusted the arc of the story he was living. Do you trust the arc of yours? The fourth lesson, your identity must be stronger than your circumstances. 27 years. Think about who you were 27 years ago. Or think about who you will be 27 years from now. Think about how thoroughly time can reshape a person, especially when that time is filled with suffering and isolation and deliberate dehumanization. Mandela came out the same man he went in, stronger, wiser, more refined, like gold that has passed through fire, but fundamentally the same man in terms of his values, his vision, his commitment to justice, his belief in the dignity of every human being. They tried to tell him who he was. Prison number 46664, criminal, terrorist, dangerous. He never believed them. He knew who he was, and that knowledge, that bedrock certainty about his own identity and purpose, was the foundation that nothing could crack. Who do you know yourself to be? Not what people have told you. Not what your failures suggest. Not what your wounds whisper in the dark. Who are you, really? That answer is your foundation. Protect it. The fifth lesson, one person's unbreakable spirit can change the world. Do not underestimate yourself. I mean this in the deepest possible way. We tell ourselves that we are ordinary, that we are too small, too unknown, too late, too broken to matter in any significant way. We say that was Mandela. That was different. That was a great man. I am just one person. But Mandela was just one person who decided that his spirit would not be broken. One person who chose dignity when dignity was being stripped away. One person who held the vision of a free and equal nation inside a 6x6 cell on a windswept island and refused to let it die. And that one person's refusal rewrote history. Your life is not small. Your choices are not insignificant. The way you carry yourself through difficulty, the way you respond to injustice, the way you treat people who have the power to harm you, the way you hold your vision when everything around you says to abandon it. These things matter. They ripple outward in ways you will never fully see. You are one person, so was he. Emotional peak. I want you to sit with something for a moment. February 11th, 1990. Robben Island is behind him. The walk from Victor Verster prison is long. The cameras of the entire world are pointed at one man. Billions of eyes watching a single figure moving through the light. And Nelson Mandela walks out. 71 years old. His hair gray. His body marked by decades of hard labor. His eyes, those extraordinary eyes, holding something that seems impossible given everything those eyes have witnessed. They are holding peace. Not the peace of a man who has given up. Not the peace of a man who has surrendered. The peace of a man who has won. Not won in the way the world usually counts winning. Not with armies or wealth or the destruction of his enemies, but won in the only way that ultimately matters. Won internally. Won the battle for his own soul. Refused to let the darkness inside him grow larger than the light. He raises his fist. And in that moment, in that single image that stopped the world, you understand something that no speech could fully articulate. That the most powerful force in the human experience is not strength of body. It is not wealth or position or the machinery of government. It is the decision to remain human when every force around you is trying to make you something less. He went on to become the president of South Africa, the first democratically elected president in his nation's history. He governed with grace and wisdom and a generosity of spirit that left the world speechless. He invited his former prison guard to sit in the front row at his inauguration. He sat down for tea with Betsy Verwoerd, the widow of one of the architects of apartheid. He created the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, giving his nation not a bloodbath but a conversation, painful, honest, necessary, about what had been done and how they would move forward together. He gave his captors the greatest possible punishment, and it was not revenge. He made them watch him become magnificent. And on the day he was inaugurated, standing before the nation and the world, he said, "Never, never, and never again shall it be that this beautiful land will again experience the oppression of one by another." And he said, "The sun shall never set on so glorious a human achievement." 27 years in a cell, and he came out calling it glorious. Not the imprisonment, not the suffering, but the achievement of coming through it without losing yourself, without losing your love for humanity, without losing the dream. That is not just inspiration. That is a revelation about what you are capable of. Because here is what I need you to hear, really hear, deep in the part of you that knows the truth when it arrives. Your suffering is not the end of your story. Whatever you are walking through right now, the loss, the failure, the betrayal, the diagnosis, the door that slammed shut, the dream that died, the relationship that broke, it is not the end. It is the quarry. It is the limestone quarry under the blinding sun where something inside you is being shaped by forces you do not yet understand, into something you cannot yet see. You do not have to understand the furnace to trust that gold comes out the other side. Mandela did not understand why 27 years were required, but he used every one of them. He used the loneliness to develop depth. He used the silence to develop wisdom. He used the hatred aimed at him to develop love. He used the attempt to diminish him to become immeasurable. That is available to you, right now, in whatever you are facing. That capacity lives inside you, not because you are Mandela, but because you are human. And he showed us what being human, fully and fiercely human, actually looks like. So what do you do with this? You do not close this video and simply feel good for 10 minutes and then scroll on to the next thing and let this become just another story you once heard. That would be the waste of a lifetime. Nelson Mandela's story is a call. It is calling you, specifically, directly, right now, and to look at your life and ask the hardest question. Where have you been allowing your prison to define you? Not a prison of iron and stone necessarily, but the prison of the story you keep telling yourself about why you cannot, about why it is too late, about why you were too hurt, too failed, too ordinary, too far behind to become what you were made to become. That story is your Robben Island, and you have the same choice Mandela had. You can let it consume you, or you can consume it. You can let the bitterness win. You can let the resentment calcify into the permanent shape of your personality. You can become the person that your worst experiences made you. Smaller, harder, closed off, certain that the world is only darkness. Or you can do the harder, braver, more extraordinary thing. You can decide in today, in this moment, not tomorrow, not when conditions are better, not when you feel ready, because you will never feel ready. You can decide that you are not your suffering, that you are not your past, that you are not the worst thing that was ever done to you or the worst thing you ever did. You can decide that the version of you that emerges from this season, from this difficulty, from this darkness, from this particular chapter of your life that feels like it may never end, is going to be more than the version that went in. Wiser, stronger, more compassionate, more certain of what matters and less distracted by what does not. More free. Because freedom, real freedom, the kind that cannot be taken away by any government or circumstance or act of cruelty when real, freedom lives here in the choices you make about who you will be in the face of what tries to break you. They gave Mandela a cell. He built a cathedral. What are you building? Because the world needs what you are carrying. Your specific story, your specific wounds and your specific wisdom and your specific capacity to look someone in the eye who is breaking and say, I know, I have been there, and I promise you, there is a way through. Your suffering is not wasted, not one day of it, not one tear, not one night of lying awake wondering if any of it will ever make sense. Every moment of it is raw material for something extraordinary. But you have to make the choice. The same choice Mandela made every morning. In a 6x6 cell in the dark. Before the guards came, before the quarry. Before another day of being told you are nothing. The choice to be everything anyway. To love anyway. To hope anyway. To build anyway. To believe, stubbornly, fiercely, unbreakably, that the life you came here to live is still possible. No matter how long it seems to be taking. No matter how many walls have gone up around you. No matter how many people have told you it cannot be done. Nelson Mandela spent 27 years being told it could not be done. He became the president of South Africa. He proved something that we must never forget. The human spirit, your spirit, is not breakable. Not by time. Not by cruelty. Not by loss. Not by failure. Not by anything this world can manufacture. You were built for more than survival. You were built for something that lasts. So stand up. Pick up what was taken from you and build something extraordinary from the pieces. Plant your garden in barren soil. Learn the language of your enemies. Walk out of whatever has been holding you and head high. Fist raised, eyes full of that impossible, undeniable, world-changing peace. And let them watch you become magnificent. That is the legacy of Nelson Mandela, and it is waiting to become yours. If this story moved you, share it with someone who needs to hear it today. Someone who is in their own Robben Island right now. Someone who needs to know that the walls do not have the last word. They never do.